Last rapid-fire speaker is Dr. Carol Barford. Oh, hi, good morning. And her work focuses on environmental systems, including agriculture. Her recent projects include a study of energy use on Wisconsin farms, an agroeconomics analysis of biomass production for heat and electric power generation. If you've been on a farm recently, you know quite a few farms are moving to that kind of on-site generation. And a study of infrastructure needed to support a biomass-based energy sector here in Wisconsin. So I want to welcome you, Carol, to the podium. Are we ready to go? Yes? All right. Welcome. Give her a hand.
Okay, thanks, Darren. I'm glad to be here and have a chance to talk about an Office of Sustainability sponsored project. A couple of years ago, I heard from a folklorist state that nobody in Wisconsin darns their socks anymore. Darning is a technique for fixing holes in socks by weaving a patch in place, and you can save an otherwise perfectly good sock. I know how to do it, but I don't do it anymore either. So why is that? And that question was tickling my brain. At about the same time, I heard about Office of Sustainability's efforts to divert waste at move-out time from the UW-Madison housing. They were finding perfectly good microwaves, perfectly good TVs in the dumpster. So why was that? Together with Ruth Olson, the folklorist, and also Nancy Wong and Andy Stevens, we set out to investigate the reasons for student consumer attitudes, especially with respect to the environment. So first we had to make a conceptual model. As we heard earlier today, the self-image and also hopes for the future self strongly motivate consumer attitudes. There are also constraints, of course, of money and resources, in the case of students, especially space. So we set about to flesh out our model using interviews, semi-structured interviews, with both current freshmen in UW housing and also alumni. We were looking not only to get basic data on consumer attitudes, but also see if we could find any differences between genders, age, and also geographic origin. So here are the interview questions. This is a little bit hard to read. There were some slightly different questions for alumni, and notably we added some questions about childhood and family after our first few interviews that seemed to be particularly fruitful, and we looped back and had our early respondents address those as well. So our main result of our interviews is that UW freshmen equate responsible consumption with careful spending. Even though this was the context of environment in the interviews, they're talking about being careful with money. They feel obligated to their parents, and they see frugality both as a way to meet their obligation and significantly to demonstrate their competence as a young adult. One student said, "They pretty much pay. I do not have a job, so they pretty much pay for everything. I would think that would make me less likely to get new stuff because that's like right out of their pocket, not mine." Another student said, and this is verbatim, "It isn't really my money so much. I think I owe it to my parents for sending me to college to save them, not to spend maybe all their money, just most of it." One other student said that childhood experiences were a big influence on her attitude. She said, "I did weekend hiking trips in high school with a teacher and learned that you could survive for a few days with just a few pair of pants, a jacket, and your water bottle." When we asked about reusing possessions and thrift shopping, as Ralph just talked about, we found the influence of popular media, and also that almost all the students we interviewed do donate clothing to recycle, but less than half will buy that clothing, citing the yuck factor of somebody else's clothes. Family history also influenced attitudes. One student said, "My mom grew up in the city in a poor neighborhood, so her mom would take her to thrift shops all the time. So like she grew up with that and she's not for it. Now it's more of a control kind of aspect. I can choose, and she chooses not to." Interestingly, some students conflated the idea of having a low stock of possessions with a low flow of possessions. One of these students cited the virtue of weeding out infrequently worn clothing from her closet and giving it away. Does that cause fewer clothes to be purchased, or just the opposite? I think I know the answer, having done that myself. Freshmen in the interviews were universally aware of the concepts from the We Can Serve campaigns, especially with respect to bottled water, electricity use, and materials recycling. For many of these interviewees, these programs seem to be in their main point of contact with environmental concerns. We found no evidence, on the other hand, of gender differences in any of our interviews with respect to consumer attitudes, but we did find that students from the East and West Coast generally tend to regard their Midwest counterparts as more down-to-earth, less flashy, less concerned with fashion and acquisition. Interviews with older alumni painted a very different picture of dorm life. An alumna from the 50s said of her arrival on campus, "I had about one suitcase." So this lucky girl had more than one suitcase. But our alumna also said, "My last year I moved to an apartment on Langdon Street with 3 or 4 other friends. I guess it was cheaper to have 4 people and there was a bedroom with bunk beds. However, there wasn't really any heat. So winter was bad with the wind off the lake. I can't remember winter clothing either. You'd be amazed at what we got away with then." 1970s alum said, "The outfit we wore was really basic. You wore the same pair of shoes, the same jeans. Everybody tried to fit in by looking grungy. I don't remember men wearing anything but blue jeans, really." Maybe that's because the UW-Madison only stopped giving wardrobe advice to students in the late 1960s. And here's the table of what you're supposed to wear when, for men and for women. They also gave etiquette tips to go with the clothing. So the university was really acting in loco parentis. Also, UW-Madison has always had regulations about what students can keep in the dorm room. And from the 1950s through the 80s, it was about this long, and it mostly had to do with fire safety. It really didn't have much to do with what all you could have in your room to keep you going every day. Now there is quite a long list. The proliferation of electronics and personal care items is especially noteworthy. Why is that? Does it just reflect consumer society, or are there other messages embedded there? And could UW-Madison be sending different messages by changing the list? So our first recommendation from our report was that We Can Serve does great things by using social mechanisms, competitions, and feedback to coach students on their consumption. We also feel that UW Extension, Cooperative Extension, would be a great resource for students. They just don't teach you how to get your jelly to gel. They also have programs about nutrition, food and nutrition, finances, environmental safety, and other practical matters, and yet they're pretty invisible here on campus to undergraduates. So the team and I hope to continue this research. We would love any chance to discuss it, and I'd like to thank those folks, especially from the Office of Sustainability, who helped with the research. Thanks.